Okay. So start out by getting our getting points from our simulation and setting some attributes on those points before we copy geometry to them. And what we want to do first is randomize the rotation around y, which we're doing with this in this vex, wrangle. We're setting the orient attribute. And we covered this in the last class, but just to review, this is just allows us to set the random rotation in degrees. And then we're using an Euler to quaternion function to convert that into values that the orient attribute can read. And if we look at the geometry spreadsheet, we have this built-in orient, and the copied points we use that in geometry will inherit those rotations when we copy to them. Next, we want to split the burst bubbles from the primary, the larger bubbles. So we use this expression here, just looking at the stream that the pop replicate is creating and saying, all right, split those out, because we don't want to copy geometry to those points. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Those points will be rendered as point primitives. And then in this output here, our main bubbles, we're again giving it some spiral motion with sine and cosine functions. So might as well review that real quick. It's always fun. So let me add a trail so we can visualize it a little bit better. Let's see. So yeah, it just gives us the spiraling motion that just adds something kind of cool to the simulation. And since it's happening post sim, it's pretty fun because we can adjust those kind of interactively. So I'm actually not sure why it's not updating. Interesting. Well, just to review real quick, the sine function just gives us a smoothly oscillating value based on the input that goes from -1 to +1. And the cosine expression is the same, but it's rotated 90 degrees. So when you combine them, you can get this great spiraling motion. And if we wanted to get a little more into this, actually, let's say we had a view that was more looking down like this, we probably wouldn't want to have them all rotating in the same direction. And that would be pretty easy to do. You just want to split the particles by some sort of threshold, like split them randomly to have half of them getting the inverse of the x component, and the other half can get the positive of that, and then you'll have them rotating in opposite directions. And we can actually go over that on Discord later on if we wanted to. So yeah, that gives us kind of nice spiraling motion. You can see if I turn it off, we're getting that. Anything on that before I keep moving?
I think we're good.
Okay. Maybe it had to do with the cache here. Well, so next, calculating velocity. I was getting sometimes you can get some wonkiness in the velocity output from your particles. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to calculate velocity again post sim. And in this case, it did help to get more consistent results. And it's important to match it by the ID. So I'm getting new velocity vectors. Probably having actually, yeah, I actually did need to do it after adding the spiral because it wasn't taking that into account for my velocities. So that was handy. Then after that, we're adding some non-uniform scale. Now, these values aren't very high and don't actually do that much, but it's a handy process to use to randomize things using the built-in scale attribute, which is a vector, whereas p scale is uniform scale float, whereas you can actually change the each axis of the scale attribute. So if we visualize that, if we take a look, these values aren't huge, so they don't do a lot, but I could just, randomly squash them a little bit if I wanted to, or make them taller. So those are handy expressions to have in your back pocket too. After that, we're setting an attribute called offset, just getting a random value based on the particle's ID and multiplying that by 10. And this setup actually, I think, probably is a little bit cleaner than the martini glass in terms of setting that offset for the noise downstream. And so it's going to be slightly different. So that becomes an attribute on the points that we can reference later, along with this one too. This is sets an integer index attribute that's just randomized. It's two values. It's going to be 0 and 1. So if we look here, we've got our offset, and then we also have an index, and it's either 0 or 1. And we're referencing that to switch between our two geometry bubble sources. So we have this beautiful bubble here, one that's a little bit flattened, and another one that's fully round. Just seemed to work for what we needed here. And then this attribute noise is deforming that bubble at every frame. And it looks kind of wild if you just look at it on one bubble, but once it's copied to the points, it's a little bit calmer. You can see we have this offset value. Just to review real quick, what this loop is doing is it's looping through and assigning this geometry to every incoming point. And then we can reference certain attributes also that are coming into those points by pointing to this, to the beginning of the loop here, the for each begin. So in the offset of our attribute noise, we're using a point function to find that and grab that offset attribute into this. And I'm also adding some additional offset by using an expression that references time times 4. So again, arbitrary, it just played with some values that seemed to work. And the same with the switch here. This is referencing that index attribute that we created. So using a point expression to look at that for each begin, looking at the index, and that will switch between the two inputs based on what the incoming point value is. And then once everything is assigned, you'll see it's running up here. We've got deforming geometry, and it's a little bit sharp. What I found was I kind of wanted that. I kind of wanted to, and then I could just smooth it out here, just using a smooth sop to get the kind of jiggle, but remove a little bit of the sharpness that the noise was giving it. So far, so good.
Question, the offset is particular per copy, or is it the same offset value?
It's per point, and the reason is because in the deform offset here, we are using a random
Right.
we're using a random value based on the particle's ID.
So this is a unique approach because usually I see the meta node for the iteration attribute and using that for the variability. You know what I mean?
You can totally do it that way. Yeah, and that's totally doable too. You could base it on the iteration. So you can create a meta import here and then reference the current iteration to change that value.
But the
But
way you're doing it is by just the incoming point.
right, by just grabbing the attributes off of the incoming points. In some cases, I find that to be a little bit more straightforward for something
Yeah,
that's not super complex.
yeah.
It's
I like
just
it. It's
it,
cool.
yeah. But yeah, if you wanted to do it based on the loop iteration, you could totally do that as well.
Nice.
Okay. So cleaning up our attributes here, just keeping velocity. I don't think you really even need p. You're always going to have position, but that's there. And a couple things we're doing here. I'm actually branching this out and doing a BDB from polygons for those. And the reason is because I want to grab their velocity into a volume attribute. So getting their point velocity and saving that as a volume as volume velocity to use later on to add vec trails. So that's being cached out. And then we have our main just geometry output here. Which brings us to trail bubbles, getting to the tail end here. So grab those. So something that's a little bit fun here is, well, we're sourcing. Bear with me a minute here while it runs up. All right. So we're sourcing from the geometry, from this bubble geometry. If we turn on the guide here, we're scattering on surfaces, and that's going to be the source for our trails. But also, I'm advecting those trails by referencing the same bubbles as velocities. So that's what this VDB from Polygon that we did to source to save vel as a volume source. So I'm referencing that as well. And that's kind of fun because as you can see from the velocity vectors of that pop advect, it gives it a little bit more upward motion. What I was finding was it allowed the bubbles not only to trail behind the main bubbles, but sort of congregate around them a little bit, which was a cool effect. And it's similar to what you might see in kind of underwater bubbles. So if I turn that off, you'll see most of them, they're going to be trailing behind. I turn that on, pushes them upward. And it's an interesting effect. Actually, yeah. And that also adding the pyro advection. So we get some additional swirly motion and some velocity that's being added to, I believe, updating the velocity based on the position. Yeah, updating their position. Yeah, and that's key because at every time step, it's looking at the position and trying to match it based on the velocity of the incoming bubbles. So far so good. And then in this case, I'm actually modifying their p-scale post simulation. Sometimes that's just handy, can kind of do it without affecting the simulation. And then just using a min-max value and remapping that. So we have a smaller amount of big particles and mostly kind of tiny foamy ones. That's our trails. Anything on that before we move on?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. That brings us to meshing output for render. So, and let me grab this one first. All right. Yeah. So let's go through the mesh branch first, and then we'll look over points. So we're grabbing the main bubble geometry here. And along with smoothing it, subdividing it seemed to help too. I think maybe because we're a little bit closer to it in this view, but it did help to subdivide them. And then a little bit of cleanup, getting rid of groups we don't need. And then merging the the meshed flip fluid in that. They're both polygon meshes right now, but then we're going to do a VDB from polygons so that we can make sure that they're meshed together. And that's going to mean where they're intersecting, they'll kind of get nice and blobby and look more liquid, especially once we smooth them. So yeah, that's now a VDB surface. In the other branch over here, we're grabbing our trails and our mid-scale particles and the burst particles, coloring them, and then merging them all together. And then same process where we're setting a p-scale threshold for what points are going to be rendered as point primitives and which ones we want to mesh. So as you can see, smaller points, p-scale that's below 0.008 are cached as points. And all they need is p-scale and velocity to render. And then the larger ones, we'll do a VDB from particles, a little bit of reshaping, and which gives us kind of like this great kind of globby look. Combine them with the flip fluid and the main bubbles, and then convert. And at this stage, we could even add a little bit of smoothing, additional smoothing, but this kind of blobby look was sort of working, I think. And so that gets converted back into polygons. And over here, there might be better ways of doing this, but I felt like this was probably kind of a cleaner way of doing it, even though it's maybe not the clearest. But taking the mesh bubbles here, which have velocities on them, and same for the point bubbles, these have velocities. So I'm merging them over here. Flip points have velocity. Our main bubbles have velocity. Merging them together. And then just so that I can transfer those velocities all at once back onto the geometry once it's meshed. So once the VDBs are meshed, reference back to get velocity, and for our preview over here to transfer color, so that we can have a easy way to preview things. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, and also our preview is a little bit different in this view. In this setup, we're actually looking at the preview post mesh, and not necessary. In fact, if you really wanted to speed things up, probably wouldn't merge it down here. You can merge it before the meshing to get a little bit of a speed improvement. But I found it was helpful for me to see things meshed um, in this particular preview. So yeah, points are cached out, and then the mesh is also cached. At that point, we have everything we need to render. And I won't get too in depth with rendering because I feel like we kind of covered that. We'll jump out of here and just quickly review, I guess. Just I have in this case, I am referencing the mesh and the points directly. I think it's probably a better idea in general to do the way we did in the last setup where we create geometry, just call it render mesh, and inside there, object merge the object merge things and reference that into your render, just in terms of organization. But I didn't set it up that way. It's kind of referencing that the master simulation setup here, the output of this cache directly. And I already have a setup. Turn this off. That's almost identical to the one we created for the martini glass. And I'm trying to think if there might be anything different. The only thing that's different is I didn't set up any custom output variables for this. That might be something that's fun. Might be fun to do on your side if you wanted to dig into some homework. We have the render. The cyc is colored slightly differently. Actually, let's make sure we turn on aces for color correction. That's better. And what else? Yeah, just tinting the water a little bit blue in the material here. So, and I also have separate materials for the geometry that's rendering as points, the point primitives, and the mesh. And the reason is because it could set a different depth value for the transmission. So I wanted to have it didn't make that much of a difference, but it was just if you wanted to have the smaller points be more colored, you have to set a depth value for the transmission that's less. That may not work for bigger geometry like the head. If that makes sense. Other than that, we're just using, looks like I'm using just standard HDR that comes with Houdini and setting a higher exposure. That's pretty much it. How did we do on time, Deborah?
We're doing great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything else unless we have some
Okay.
questions. But
Any questions, anyone? This is awesome. Super great. Beautiful work. Any questions, you guys?
Yeah, quick one on the in the pop wrangles, like in the min pos function, um how are you referencing the head geometry in? Is that coming in through the
yeah, it's necessary anytime you use a
like
pop wrangle, it's necessary to set the input manually.
okay, that's right.
Yeah.
You have to okay.
Yeah. So I'll dive in real quick here.
Yeah.
And in the min pos here, you can see in the inputs, it's using a saw path. Yeah. That min pos function is super useful.
Yeah,
It's very
cool.
simple. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a kind of a gotcha. I'm glad you brought that up, Douglas.
Yeah.
Any other questions, you guys? Okie doksies. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for completing such a great course.
It was my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for joining me on this little journey. It's been a lot of fun.
I really hope you come back and teach another class, and I think everyone
Absolutely.
else enjoyed it. So, yeah,
This was awesome.
congratulations. And thanks everyone for joining us on this Saturday.
Thank you. Very nice techniques. Really cool. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and I'll be checking Discord, and I love the discussion. I love the projects that people are doing based on the setup. It's always so much fun to see stuff that you
Yeah.
guys are doing. So yeah, it's been a blast.
Please, everybody, post your work. And yeah, we love seeing that. And thanks for everyone's participation. And have a great Saturday. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Andrew.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.